Welcome to the place where you, the individual atheist, can converse with me, the individual Christian. After all, let's face it, you typed in atheist, sort by new, you get this guy like, you're like, I want to debate, you're a Christian. I'm like, no, that's not what this channel is. We do things differently here. We have emotionally intelligent conversations and really try to find out, well, what can we agree on? How can you become a better atheist in theory and me become a better Christian, a better human being? And some might even say, well, Nick, are you sure you're a Christian? You sound maybe more like you're a humanist. Well, teach me more about that and maybe I'll make a video about it. But ultimately, here's something that I glanced through in the comments of one of my other atheist videos that I think is worth exploring. I do believe that there are some atheists, if they had their way, that they would outlaw religion. So I just want to talk about that concept. Because one of the things I recently mentioned and I made a video about is I think the default for humans is that we, by default, want to believe in God or a higher power. And it's not just Christianity. We can look at the history of the world, look at all the other religions, even if we're looking at Norse mythology or whatever it is, and Thor and all that. People want to believe in a higher power. That's generally the default for most people. And that's evident. Yet, it's crazy. So you're believing in something you can't see? That seems like a hard sell, but it's not, because apparently we're wired for that. So let's talk about this concept. Well, what if religion was just outlawed? Well, what I would say is look at China and look at Russia. Being in the Christian faith, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I would hear feedback from missionaries that were serving in Russia and China, where basically the government made it illegal and punishable by death or imprisonment if they found out you were a Christian. I've even heard this theory. There's no way to prove it wrong or right. But I've heard, in theory, there are more Christians in China than there are in the United States because of the underground church, because of so much freedom that could be lost, especially back in the 80s and 90s, that there was more Christians over in China. Geographically, China is comparable to the United States, but they have so much more people than us. In theory, there could be more Christians in China than there are in the United States. You get to heaven, and if we all still have human-looking bodies that we still kind of recognize each other, like, wow, like, there's a lot of Chinese people here in heaven. So that's a place where ultimately Christianity was illegal, and in Russia the same thing. I've heard so many stories like that, where despite it being illegal, people still do it. So I guess my first question is, as an individual atheist, do you really wish that Christianity or religion were outlawed? I guess that's my first question for you. Because I think, honestly, if you're being honest with me about this, I think you know that would be ultimately really silly. Because what's going to happen? You outlaw Christianity, Christianity still survives. I mean, Christianity survived Rome when they're feeding Christians to the lions and making a sport of it. It survived that. It has survived so much through history, and it's still actually the most popular religion in the world. It survives. And I think that's fascinating. Because imagine this. I'm thinking like an atheist. Even if I were wrong as a Christian and Christianity was all just some kind of weird thing that some Jewish people made up a long time ago, and some Jewish people got off track and made their own religion and made all this up, it's still quite miraculous. I think that word is fair. Miraculous. The Christianity today would still be the most popular religion in the world and survive so much. So many people have lost their lives or freedom simply for believing in Christianity. Not so much in the United States, but overseas. In Russia, in China, in the Middle East, and even in Rome back in more biblical days. Yet it still exists and is the most popular religion. It's still thriving. So you make it illegal, it doesn't mean that history has proven that wouldn't change anything. If anything, it might even make it stronger. It might, sure, Christianity would lose a certain percent, but the percent that exists, I think, would be that much more evident. And people in that sense of, oh wait, we can't believe anymore, it's illegal now, I think that would ultimately cause a certain stirring and awakening within itself. So I think if you're being honest, you'll agree with me, making religion, especially Christianity, illegal would not solve any problem. I think there are atheists who I have heard say this, that religion makes the world worse, especially Christianity. That's the reason for all these wars and all this. Actually, if you ask me, I think it has more to do with the United States having surveillance over the whole world, so that we basically never actually get attacked ourselves. We can always be meddling in someone else's business and having surveillance of the whole world. I think it has more to do with that. I don't think it's actually about religion. But I think the United States uses that, the whole stuff in the Middle East with Islam, and I think they use that as a reason for us to stay at war over there, so that most people in the United States won't actually ask, hey, why are we still over the Middle East? What are we actually still doing? And then, because 9/11. Yeah, but the people that were on the plane that crashed in the towers were actually from Saudi Arabia. Why aren't we attacking Saudi Arabia? Oh, because we're oil alliances with, we're in alliance with them with oil. They're actually our ally, like Israel is. Oh, okay. So that's why. So we, as the United States, we use religion as a reason to prosper our nation. Okay, I get it. But see, to say that religion is the reason for the war, I say the war exists because religion exists, and there are easy perceived enemies because, oh, they're not Christian, they're Muslim. Okay, good. We needed a perceived enemy. You had me scared there for a minute because, man, in the Cold War we had Russia, and they look so much like us, so it's harder to see someone as an enemy when they look so much like you. But man, if they're Muslim and they've got a different religion and a different ethnic background, that makes it easy for us just to stay in war a couple decades. Okay, good. So that's what I would say ultimately. I think it's an interesting concept. I'm a libertarian. I know a lot of you have heard me say that. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm the guy who ultimately says both parties have some good ideas and both parties have some bad ideas, but I'm never going to give all my allegiance to one side, because that's ridiculous. When you give that much power and control to the government, you're ultimately digging yourself in a hole, putting yourself in a corner to where you have to be so patriotic that you buy into that. Like, I don't buy into the fact that we're constantly at war in the Middle East and we're just supposed to go along with it. I would have totally been the guy, even in Vietnam, I would have been a draft dodger. Even back then, it would have made sense to me. Why are we getting involved in this war, this civil war, basically? What does this have to do with us? Are we really fighting for the United States freedom in this thing? So for me, my mind thinks differently, and I would have been a draft dodger, and that could have been rough for me, I guess, in the 60s or 70s if that would have been the case. But of course, with Vietnam draft, they specifically targeted people who were of lower income or minority status. So if you were a white guy who was married and had a job like me, it would be very unlikely to be. What they wanted to do is they wanted to kind of weed out the people who they perceived who would contribute less to society. Let's let them fight this political war. So I think it is interesting, the concept of war and religion and that sort of thing. But again, the real topic, and we can talk more about that in another video, but I do think it's very interesting that trying to make Christianity illegal, it wouldn't work. And history has proven that time and time again. Go ahead and take it up from here. What do you got to say in the comments?